And we're back on the Liberal Oasis radio show. This is Bill Scher on another glorious Saturday. Every Tuesday, coming out to Northampton's Drinking Liberally, 6:30 p.m. at the Northampton Brewery every Tuesday. I've been doing this show for about 2 months, so I'm in due of a long vacation, of course. The great David Pakman from Midweek Politics on Valley Free Radio will be sitting in for the next few weeks. Be sure to check him out on Liberal Oasis radio show every Saturday at 10 a.m. here on WHMP. On the phone with us from Burlington, Vermont, I might say the hardest working blogger in the blogosphere, Steve Benen. He not only is housed at the carpetbaggerreport.com, you can also see him at talkingpointsmemo.com. I believe sometimes at crooksandliars.com. Am I missing anything? Oh, and the blog report at salon.com.
I think you've touched all the bases. Thank you, Bill.
It's great to have you on.
It's good to be here.
Now, your folks at Salon mentioned earlier this week that today, key conservative and religious leaders are going to be discussing a mass defection from the Republican Party in D.C. today. What is going on here, and are we seeing a major crack-up in the conservative coalition?
Well, that depends on who you ask. I happen to think that, yes, we're seeing what is the beginning of a major crack-up. The religious right, the James Dobsons, the Gary Bowers of the world, are deeply worried about Rudy Giuliani getting the Republican nomination. It would really be the death knell of the religious right movement in general, because it would demonstrate that they really don't have the power that they think they have. If the GOP nominee is somebody who's pro-choice, supports gay rights, serial adulterer, thrice married, etc. And so they're starting to panic and think, what are we going to do about this? If Giuliani continues on this path and he continues to be the front runner, they're threatening to create a third-party movement or support a third-party candidate. And I don't think they're bluffing. I think that they have to do this if they want to maintain any integrity with their own supporters.
Now, there are some polls showing that Giuliani actually polls well among evangelical voters. Is it possible that the James Dobsons of the world are out of touch with their own flock?
It's possible, but I have a slightly different theory. I think that most of those voters don't realize who Rudy Giuliani really is. There are a handful of polls, I think from Gallup last month, among others, when you ask Republican primary and caucus voters who is the pro-choice candidate in the field, they don't know. I think that at this point, most of the candidates have been generally positive towards one another. You really haven't seen any of the bitter, nasty attacks yet. And I think, as a result, primary voters haven't heard from the Fred Thompsons of the world or Mitt Romney or whomever that Rudy Giuliani's background is really, on some of these issues, obviously antithetical to the Republican Party agenda. And at the top of that list, obviously, would be the fact that he was pro-choice and supported funding of abortions, etc. I think that once that information becomes better known, I think you'll see some of that support drop. But I think at this point, you're right. There's data to show that he's not all that unpopular. I just think that that's a result of some widespread confusion.
Now, do these potential defectors, do they feel that they carry great weight within the coalition? Are they concerned that if they pull this move, that they might expose their weaknesses and show that they don't have the numbers to really affect the general election?
I think you're absolutely right. I think that's the biggest fear and a part of a lot of these religious right leaders is that they may not be bluffing. They may feel like they have to do this, but if they do it and fail, and say Giuliani wins their election, or can just get past all of the religious right opposition and it doesn't matter, then their movement is really screwed because it becomes the masquerade is over. You rip off the mask and they don't have the power that they claim. And the GOP in general, the establishment, will stop taking the movement seriously altogether. I think, though, that what we'll see instead in the short term is that they're going to have to rally around a single candidate. And I think we've started to see some of that already with rallying around Mitt Romney. Bob Jones III, for example, at Bob Jones University this week, just the other day, endorsed Mitt Romney, and there were others at Bob Jones who did the same. And I think we're starting to see that they're going to have to coalesce around someone as the anti-Romney in the race.
Now, Bob Jones heads the Bob Jones University in South Carolina. This has been a school that is known for banning interracial dating.
Yes.
And has called the Mormon religion a cult.
Yes.
Yet he is still endorsing Mitt Romney, who is a Mormon.
Exactly. The opposition to Giuliani is so strong that they're willing to endorse a candidate who they consider to be a member of a cult by their own standards, not mine, obviously, but by their own. That's the intensity of the opposition to a Giuliani candidacy among leaders of the religious right.
Now, why would there be a gravitation towards Mitt Romney when the two main social conservatives in the race to this point were former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee and Kansas Senator Sam Brownback? Sam Brownback is about to drop out or has dropped out. Why wouldn't they rally around Mike Huckabee at this point? Because he's got a little bit of momentum going right now.
Well, sure. That's the natural question. I mean, Huckabee is a Baptist minister. He's an evangelical. He agrees with them on these social issues across the board, and his record as governor is very solid. The thing about the religious right that I think is interesting to note is that they're crazy, but they're not stupid. And I think that they look at the field with a fairly savvy eye. They see that Mike Huckabee is struggling in the polls, he has very little money, and he's not considered credible as a general election candidate at this point. And so they're thinking, okay, well, who else can we go to? There are other candidates. I mean, Alan Keyes would be across the board, right on target with James Dobson. But Dobson's not going to endorse Alan Keyes because he knows Alan Keyes is not a credible candidate. I think that Mike Huckabee is obviously a step up from Alan Keyes, but not that much of a step up as far as the religious right is concerned. And so they're thinking they want someone who is A, a credible candidate, B, a competitive candidate, and C, who's going to at least pay lip service to everything they care about. Mitt Romney fits that bill pretty well.
But it's strictly pragmatic. If, in theory, Huckabee was doing better in the polls, that could change?
I think so. I think that if somehow Mike Huckabee figured out a way to raise money and continue to poll well in Iowa, for example, say finish top 2 or 3 in Iowa, you could see a serious move in the direction of Mike Huckabee among religious right leaders. But at this point, Huckabee just hasn't been able to bring it. He doesn't have any money. He doesn't have a real organization. He's running a fairly small staff campaign. And the religious right sees that, and they're unimpressed, and they're thinking there's no reason to invest in a candidate who's not going to be able to stick around past, say, February 5th.
Well, just to make my own comment here, I've said for a long time, if I may plug my own book, Wait, Don't Move to Canada, the data never showed that the hard right evangelical movement was the difference in 2004. They spun it that way. They tried to convince the media that they turned out and that was the difference, but that never held up in the actual exit poll data. And I think they're taking a big, big risk for their own influence by, again, unveiling the mask and showing that they are not all they're cracked up to be and don't really have the significant amount of grassroots support. What else is on your political radar? What do you think else has happened this week that people need to be talking about more?
Well, I think the S-chip bill is getting plenty of attention, but I think it can never get too much attention. This was a tremendous debacle, as far as I'm concerned, both on policy grounds and for the Republican Party in general. The Democrats and Republicans got together on a compromise bill that extended coverage for 10 million kids.
Actually, can I hold you off just one point there? John Boehner, the House Minority Leader, he was on the floor. He voted against this. He helped sustain the veto. This is what he had to say on the floor earlier this week. Oh, 1 second. Minor technical problem.
The American people are tired of all the political games. They want us to find some way to work together to resolve our differences and to help move America forward.
So he was looking at a bipartisan bill that is supported by about 70% of the country, if not more. Mm-hmm. It had support of 44 House Republicans. And his complaint was that it was not bipartisan enough. And we shouldn't be playing politics.
Right.
Is that going to add up with the public?
Well, no, you're laughing and I'm laughing, and I think it's for good reason. It's just such a transparently silly argument. The chief proponents in the Senate, the people who were arguing most vociferously on behalf of the legislation, were Orrin Hatch and Chuck Grassley. Both of them are conservative Republican senators. It was endorsed by Republican governors, the American Medical Association, children's advocates. The list goes on and on. And the notion that somehow this was a partisan bill, that Democrats had kind of rammed this through Congress, is just transparently silly. And by virtue of the fact that it enjoys such broad bipartisan support. So I think John Boehner is kind of desperate, and I think his arguments reflect that.